Hello, everybody. Guess what? We are now at episode 31 in ScaleApp Podcasts, bringing to you the experiences, the trials and tribulations of founders who scale beyond start from all over the world. I think we've covered 8 or 9 countries by now, at least, if not more, and in all different sectors, technology, non-technology. Today, we're really lucky to have with us a healthcare veteran, Christina LaMontagne. Say hi, Christina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to get into her venture that she's growing as we speak. But before that, I want to ask a question, a little bit of curveball. I ask everyone this question, almost everyone, and that, ignore clarity completely, ignore the business that you've done. Tell us a little bit about who you are as a person without mentioning the businesses.
Fair enough. I am someone who is very purpose-driven. Throughout my career, I've really gravitated towards the things and the trends that really touch me as a human. So even back to my earliest job in high school, working at an HIV and AIDS clinic in the mid-90s, I then got very captured by the rapid acceleration of progress in China and spent almost a decade of my life living in China and learning all about what, rapid development in a very different country and culture can mean. Um, and so
So,
that
hey, so
that
hang on.
yeah,
You spent a decade in China?
I spent a decade going back and forth. Yeah, I first went to China when I was 14. I was a pretty small town kid growing up in upstate New York, but GE was the local big tech company in my backyard. And so I was fortunate to grow up with more exposure to the rest of the world than you might think. And a lot of the kids I went to high school with were sons and daughters of PhD immigrants who'd come to study physics or something like that, chemistry in the US. And so I had this interest in Asia, I think, based on those human relationships. And then I got just really captured by this experience I had at age 14 and knew when I went to college I wanted to study Chinese, influenced my choice of um, college. I got a Fulbright after writing my thesis on public health in China, and found ways to build a public health and then a business career over about a decade, going back and forth.
I assume you speak some Mandarin, if not.
Yeah. At the time, I spoke fluent business Mandarin and was, fun fact, my first job out of college when I had this Fulbright grant, instead of being a student for another year, I used that grant to self-fund an internship with the Chinese Center of Disease Control. So I worked for the Chinese government in my first job straight out of college. And at this moment, post-SARS, post-avian flu, where the country was really opening up and thinking about their global impact on health, was just fascinating.
So you're highly suspect, among other things, but that's a joke. But doesn't learning Mandarin or other very different language, doesn't that change your brain in some way?
I mean, everything about that experience changed who I am and how I think. That experience living in China and seeing rapid growth and change, I think is what ultimately led me to Silicon Valley and startups. I mean, it's just the only other thing like it, that I could experience. But yeah, I mean, when you were learning, I mean, first of all, just the hours, the dedication. There was no Duolingo, right? I'm in a language lab with earphones and cassette tapes practicing my tones, at all hours of the day. So the work ethic, it's just really challenging. There are other ways of earning your language credit, that's for sure. But then you have this, incredible like opening where because you can speak and communicate with people who are very different than you, the way you interpret the world and the way you think about people and understand people is very different, I think.
Yeah, okay. Um, so let's fast forward to clarity and
Yeah.
tell us what clarity is. And then maybe there's a connection there. Maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
I don't want to force it, but if there is, let us know.
I'll say this about the connection and then we'll get to clarity. But when you're 21 and you've spent, 3 years learning Chinese, and then you get to China and you can still barely carry it on a conversation, it's very humbling. And then no one from your family or immediate friends have ever had the same experience before. You are just learning everything and making a go of things and navigating in very much the same way that you are as a startup founder. So that's the obvious connection to me, is that feeling like you're the odd one out, feeling like you don't belong, but having this idea of the life that I wanted to live in China and just being tenacious in pursuing that is very akin to a lot of the way that I approach being a founder. Okay, so Clarity Pediatrics, I started in 2021, and we are a telehealth company for children and their families that focuses on chronic disease. So we provide multi-specialty care oriented around specific conditions where there is very high and growing prevalence and not not a lot of supply of clinical care. And so we're closing the access gaps through our business, but through our clinical model, we're really making, you know, 10x more care, 100x more care available to children who need it in the US than can be found through traditional healthcare models.
Or give us an example, if you will.
Sure. So we decided to start our wedge in this chronic care market is ADHD. So we focus on conditions that are safe, right? Our first company value is patient safety always comes first. So these are conditions that are high prevalence, as I mentioned, but not extremely complex. They're common. So ADHD is on our roadmap. We now offer anxiety care, obesity, and immune diseases, other metabolic diseases, neuro diseases. There's a number of conditions that fall in this category, and what's similar about all of them is that they require multi-specialty care. There's often a wait list to get into the specialist. Insurance doesn't always cover the specialty care. It's only about 20 to 30% of kids with these conditions can actually access what's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we started in ADHD, where what is recommended with about 50 years of evidence is both a therapy for the family as well as a medication. In the real world, many families start one place for an evaluation for ADHD, end up somewhere else for therapy, and end up somewhere else for medication if they end up getting access to all those things. But at Clarity, a family can enter care within a week or two and get that evaluation and assessment, and then all the pieces of therapy in one place covered by both commercial and Medicaid.
So it's not just out-of-pocket private payment. This is recognized.
Over 90% of our patients use insurance.
Got it. So how did you get there, and what were some of the challenges on the way? It sounds complicated, and maybe it is because many, not all, but many good ventures sound complicated because that's what makes them work. Is that if they were simple, someone else would be doing it, right?
Yeah, that's right. If it were simple, someone else will do it. So I will say, pediatrics is complicated because there's another, as if healthcare isn't complicated enough, then you have the parent acting as a proxy for the patient, right? So it's very complicated to work in pediatrics. Taking Medicaid and commercial is complicated. Having multiple specialties all on one platform is complicated. Doesn't really exist in the real world, again. But we started, my co-founder and I, in a different place. So my co-founder is a pediatric interventional cardiologist. He also took time out to do the Stanford Biodesign Innovation Fellowship and to learn how to innovate within healthcare, and worked at IDEO for a short period as well. He's also an immigrant from Guatemala, so back to some of those formative experiences and dealing with ambiguity and doing hard things. That's certainly his life experience as well. So he came at it saying, well, as a cardiologist, have about 200 or 250 patients in my panel, and I can take care of all of them. And they have life-threatening conditions, some of them, and they get the best possible care in the United States. Now, if our child were to have asthma or ADHD, why wouldn't that also be true? And then that cascaded, all of these, issues that I alluded to before in how families access care. As the business person, I started in a different place, which was to say, where are the growing markets in pediatrics? And behavioral health was the obvious one, and many companies were already getting started in that area. But my insight was to say, well, but what's really so different about the patient journey between some of the behavioral conditions and the medical conditions? And could you build a platform that spans all of them and therefore solves more problems, drives more value, and can actually transform a whole system, instead of one condition or one specialty? And so we put our skills together, and then, and then you said, why hasn't this happened before? Well, pediatrics is underfunded, under-innovated. There's a lot of safety guardrails for good reason. Probably less talent has tended to flow into pediatrics because of those reasons. And we just said, how can we build, knowing all those things today, instead of waiting to find out with our venture dollars, knowing those things today, like how could we actually build a profitable model that can solve all these problems and provide the clinical outcomes that all kids deserve.
Let's talk business just for a second here. How do you make money in Clarity?
So we basically charge fee for service. So for non-healthcare people, that means a patient is seen, a bill is created and sent to an insurance company, as opposed to a bundle of care where you might bill an insurance company for, a whole episode of care like a surgery. Okay, so we're seeing patients fee for service. We're seeing them efficiently via telehealth. And then we're seeing them in group care, which means we can bill for multiple patients for one clinical encounter. And so we make our money by billing insurance, getting paid by insurance, and then patient copay, and we make our margin on a more efficient delivery system.
So when you say group care, what does that mean? I mean, people being treated together? Is that?
That's right. Yeah,
what's that all about?
So again, we start with, in any condition we're serving, what is the evidence-based treatment? But part of why we have a mental health, shortage and challenge, particularly for kids today, is your average therapist is only able to see 20 or 25 patients a week. That's what clinical capacity is for a full-time provider on average, right? Some people are different. But there's just too many kids, right? There's, thousands of kids with ADHD trying to see every possible therapist in the US. And every possible therapist in the US, by the way, is trained to see things other than ADHD, right? So, seeing patients one at a time, just simply isn't working. So we said, well, let's start with putting a number of families together in care, and that will help us accelerate access to care. So we have 8 families in one group at any given time.
What does that mean? They get treated? I mean, the one child be treated, and 7 other families they're watching. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. So let's start with the therapy, because this is the most obvious example. So the therapy that we offer is called behavioral parent training. It's a therapy that parents join, not the children. Because kids with ADHD can't sit through a therapy and expect great outcomes. There's no evidence for that, right? So the parents join. And so think of it as like a parent therapy group, where the therapist is in each session telling the parents a new therapeutic technique that is proven to work for children with ADHD. So these can be things like special time or praise and reward. And then the group is getting the benefit of hearing from other people, understanding what's working from other people, getting support from other people. And so what we found is that the group is actually quite engaging for most parents. It's validating of their struggle in a way that only another parent can be. Um, and it gives families a real community. So a lot of groups, after they end, parents meet up in real life. Or if they don't live close to each other, they form WhatsApp groups.
So in a way, the parent becomes the caregiver, or in some
Train
sense.
the trainer. Exactly.
Right. And so okay. So you train them together, and there's a synergistic effect.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the organization and the question of scale. So how do you make this into I don't know what your vision is, but how do you turn this into a really big company? Because we hear a lot, we read a lot about ADHD, and of course we hear a little bit about the misdiagnosis. We hear other kinds of opinions, but there's no doubt that it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
It's a huge issue for the kids that have it. It's a huge issue for schools. It's a huge issue for families. So I guess there's no question that it's a big, big problem. How do you get big so that you can address it?
Yeah. So it is both a human solution as well as a technology solution. So in the current healthcare ecosystem, you can bill insurance companies for the most part only if you have a human delivering the therapy and the treatment. So we do scale our providers by groups, so they can serve dozens, even hundreds of patients any given week, as opposed to the 20 or 25 that they might have seen in a private practice. And then we build technology that makes them as efficient as possible, makes their diagnoses and treatment plans as specific and personalized as possible. And then over time, we're building more and more AI-like features to complement the human delivery of care with certain automations driven by AI that
Like
could be
what?
in session or outside of
Like
session.
what? Give an example.
Yeah. Parents come to that group session for, train the trainer, right? But then life happens in between those sessions. And so wouldn't it be nice if something were available to the parents that was steeped and knowledgeable and trained on all of the things that work for a child with ADHD, or we're now serving anxiety patients, whatever it might be. So that's one example. Another is how we think about delivering a really specific diagnostic experience by incorporating everything we already know about that patient. So the minute that telehealth encounter starts, we're already approaching it with a clear view of who that child is.
So the AI will help analyze and present the information, lots and lots of information about the patient or the child.
That's right. And it's particularly valuable on our platform because we haven't gotten to this yet, but our go-to-market motion is through referring pediatricians. So, there's information that we can be gathering from months, if not years, before the patient is ever referred to us, because the pediatrician referring the patient knows that child and family so well.
Okay, let's talk about that, because that must be part of the scale. Is you mentioned providers, but do those providers work for you, or are they third party? I mean, how does this work?
Yeah. So all of our clinicians do work for us, and we made the choice to make them W-2s instead of 1099s. This is an important nuance in the world of telehealth, but to optimize for quality, for training, and for speed of developing new clinical treatment modalities, we wanted to have all of our clinicians as employees.
Got it. But you mentioned other providers
That's right.
that
And
might
then there are
out-
providers who
right.
refer to us. Yes. So one of our early insights, back to the founding story, and my co-founder being a cardiologist, is that all of his patients were sent to him via referral, right? And they converted at very high rates, and that there was a certain trust that was conveyed from the pediatrician to the parent as they continue their journey towards specialty care. We felt that this trust imperative was particularly important in pediatrics. So you might respond to a New York subway ad for your own hair loss needs, for example, when it comes to a cash pay, direct to consumer telehealth model. But when it's ADHD or anxiety or obesity or asthma for your child, you're probably looking for a different level of confidence before you make that conversion action. And so, yes, so pediatricians, we have sought from day one to build the highest level of trust with pediatricians based on our credibility, our coverage, our outcomes, and to earn their trust in referring their precious patients to us. And we take that very seriously.
So those referring pediatricians, they're outside of your company. They're
Outside.
right. They refer inside to
That's right.
inside Clarity.
They work at academic centers. They work at private centers. They work at concierge centers. Yeah.
So how does this chart the path? I mean, how big are you today? Chart the path to how big you want to be and how big you can be, Clarity, as a company.
Yeah. So we raised our Series A, which is about to be announced, with outcomes from one condition, really in just one state.
ADHD.
That's right. And we really doubled down on unit economics, really understanding our playbooks so that we could deploy that Series A to scale. So now we've already launched the second condition, which is anxiety. We're moving into our next set of conditions in Q1 of 2026. And so, by understanding the pain points of parents, understanding the pain points of the referring pediatricians, we understand where there are these gaps in care and access throughout the system, and we are systematically targeting them one by one. So over the next year or two, we'll see Clarity having expertise in delivering multi-specialty care across a number of chronic conditions. You'll see Clarity in a number of states. You'll see Clarity expanding, not just in the commercial, but also the Medicaid population. Almost 50% of kids are enrolled in Medicaid in the United States. So if you want TAM and want to be big, you've got to take care of the whole population.
And totally available market, TAM.
Yeah. So those are the things that we'll be doing. And then as we expand into more conditions, we hope we continue to have this virtuous flywheel of building more and more trust for a pediatrician who says, oh, Clarity, thanks so much for taking care of my ADHD population. Now that your anxiety, I'd like to send those patients to you as well. And oh, now you're moving into other conditions that feel the same, where I have the same frustration of where to send my patients. There's nowhere good. I'd like to send those. So we hope, back to your point about growth, that the more we expand, the more relevant we are to a greater segment of the pediatrician's panel, the more repeat value we've created for that pediatrician and all the families in their panel. And so our flywheel of referrals grows faster and faster.
So it sounds a little bit like land and expand in the sense that one condition, one state, get that right, prove the model, get enough resources, including raising capital, to then expand. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And that has another, twist on it in healthcare, where healthcare is still such a local industry, even if you're telehealth, that you absolutely, with our model, want to land in a new geography, earn that trust, and then start to move as quickly as possible.
So where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Just arbitrary 5 years.
In terms of
size, states, numbers of conditions, revenues, value created. I don't know.
Yeah. So there are 25 million patients in the United States that have a condition that's on our list. So I'd like to be serving, few million patients in this business over time. That means we have to be in many states, although interestingly, about half of kids in the U.S. live in just 10 states. So
are these most popular?
most populous states. That's right. So, I don't know that we'll be in all 50 states actually,
You do not have to be, right?
but we'll be in many big states again, because it takes time to earn that trust, right? We don't want to spray and pray with this model. The kids are too precious. And we're already serving thousands of patients every month. I'd like us to be serving hundreds of thousands of patients every month.
And let's just talk a little bit about raising money. It's not something we talk about a lot on this podcast, because we talk a lot more about raising customers than raising money. But raising money, it sounds like that's really critical once you proved the model, or you felt that you proved the model worked. What were they looking at when they said, okay, one condition, one state? It doesn't sound like a lot, perhaps.
Well,
Did you get a lot of no's?
ADHD itself is about a $25 billion market just for children. So it's a big market. You could build a big business just in ADHD. And there are other great companies like NoCD, like Equip, that have built great companies, focused on just OCD or just eating disorders or something like that. So ADHD is a big market. And that's part of why we chose it. But, we welcomed, I think, in addition to our lead, 3 or 4 additional new investors to our syndicate. So overall, capital early stage for non-AI companies in telehealth has been shrinking. And so, yeah, it was a job to attract capital, but we were successful, and we raised a little more than we'd gone out to raise, and it gives us the runway to build this bigger business and to get to a point of near profitability.
Did you think at all about exit? I mean, I know your investors do, that's their business, but it sounds like something you're really committed to, and that means a lot to you personally.
Yeah.
Do you think this is something you're going to do the rest of your life? I mean, you don't. We're not going to make you promise right now, but it sounds like it. I mean, it sounds like something that's really important to you.
I genuinely hope so. When you take such a big risk in your mid-40s, when you have built a career that would afford you other options, you really have to be a believer. And back to my initial, what is it about me? Like, I'm just very purpose-driven. And so it's hard for me to imagine doing anything else at this point or even into the future. I'm sorry, I forgot the end of
Well, it's just to ask you, something that you see yourself doing for a very long period of time, or is just, are you looking for the exit? I know you're not,
right, the exit.
but yeah.
Not really, because there's so much to do right now. But look, there were 2 major digital health IPOs earlier this year in 2025. Both of them were in chronic disease delivery, right? So Hinge and Omada. And back to my point earlier, there's been a lot of shots on goal on adult chronic disease. There have been very few, like you're looking at it, shot on goal on a digital health model for chronic disease for kids.
Right.
As time goes on, like you as a founder, you get more and more convinced that, you're going to do it and that it needs to happen, and it could be very, very big.
So a couple more questions, and then we'll try to wrap up. But one of them is, and it's a touchy question, but there's a lot of turmoil in healthcare, especially in the United States, because of our secretary, and I'm just wondering, I don't know if you want to say it or not, but does this make it easier or harder for your business, or irrelevant? The kind of the political, that's the right word, the political element that's become so tangible in healthcare.
Sure. So I'll give you a positive and a negative. So the positive is, look, the administration deserves some serious accolades and consideration for the way that they are thinking about pediatric chronic disease. This is the first administration that hasn't just thought about healthy eating or movement or literacy, but they're really looking at the wellness of a child overall. And they're getting back to fundamentals about, our food system, for example. That is net positive. I like a lot of the pillars that are coming out of the way Kennedy and Macari, the MAHA organization is thinking. They're right on many counts. What makes it hard is the uncertainty. So there are some things that feel absolutely right, and there are some things, and we want to move quickly on them, and there are some things that are a little bit of a head scratcher, and sometimes those things move quickly too. And so it's the uncertainty that's challenging.
Okay, got that. I can only imagine. Let's wrap up with the final question. You said it. I didn't ask you. You said mid-40s. All right.
Yeah.
If you were to meet your younger self coming back off the plane from China, let's say at the age of 22 or 23, I'm just making this up, obviously, and saying, I want to start a healthcare company in the United States. I think there's a huge opportunity. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I'd say, that same um that same audacity, right? That like got me on a plane to build this completely different life for myself in China is really a superpower as a founder. So lean into that. And then the other thing I would say is that healthcare as an industry is really glass half full, a gift that keeps on giving. Glass half empty, there's just no shortage of problems to be solved. So you can, happily build a career trying to solve problems, and, what a fulfilling way to spend your career.
Wow. So part of it is the sort of mindset, having a very strong mindset. And a second one is the industry itself. The choice of industry, that it's for better, for worse. I mean, it's bad that there are lots of problems, but at least a lot of opportunities.
That's right.
That's what I hear you saying. And so we're going to have to end. Thank you very much, Christina LaMontagne, the co-founder of Clarity Pediatrics. And it's really wonderful. I really hope that 5 years from now we can have you, maybe sooner, on this podcast, and you'll tell us about all the new treatment categories and the new states and all the thousands and tens of thousands of patients that you're serving. I mean, I don't think anybody can listen to this and not root for you. If it's not our kids, it's our friends' kids, our kids' kids. I mean, we know this is a huge problem that you're dealing with. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. This is ScaleApp Podcasts, everybody. We're talking about scaling up companies. We're not talking about starting them. Starting is easy. Having babies is easy. Growing families is hard. It's sustained. It's long-term. It's much more complicated. I'm not making light. I've never had a baby myself, as you can imagine, but I have been around. I've had 4 kids, and I was at every one of their births. I know how hard it is. At least I was there. But still, compared to raising them, it's sort of start and finish, but growing a family is a sustained, complicated thing. Growing a company, a sustained, complicated thing with lots and lots of challenges along the way. And those of you who are navigating those challenges, great, because what you're doing is creating value. You're creating value for, first of all, guess what? Customers. Someone said raising capital from customers is better than raising capital from capitalists. Sometimes you do the latter to get to the former, but building value for customers, building value for shareholders and our society. I mean, there's just so much value that you get from growing a real company. And I think I really admire what you said, Christina, about the exit. It's not the exit that's driving you, it sounds like. I mean, that may or may not happen. Probably will. You probably have opportunities, and you may say, you know what, I'm doing something that's important to me. And that's my exit. My exit is sort of in terms of seeing all these families and kids getting healthy. So it's wonderful to meet you and talk to you, and I really look forward to seeing you again soon, I hope. So
Thanks for great conversation.
this is ScaleApp Podcasts. I'm Dan Eisenberg. You know the drill. Pass this on to your friends if you've enjoyed listening to us. This is about growing companies, because starting it's like, I've said many times, it's like having a family. Making the baby, it's hard, but it's easy compared to growing a healthy family, because that's a real sustained effort, and there are a lot of turns and twists on the way. So anyway, scaling up is where the growth happens and where the value is created. So again, thank you all for listening, and we'll hope to have you hear us again soon.